So just myself, my name is Laurel Hart. I'm one of the main organizers for Babies for Climate Action Vancouver, and working closely with the New West group. Thankful for that during this pandemic time. Lots of parents are struggling to just everything. So I'm just going to introduce the Bank Switch program briefly. So it's going to be kind of an overview, and we'll provide you with more materials if you want to get more deeply into it. Okay, so Bank Switch is a national campaign designed to get Canada's big 5 banks to change their lending policies, which will reduce the loans that allow fossil fuel expansion to happen. The goal of Bank Switch is to pressure the banks and create a critical moment by imposing a deadline for banks to make a change. The deadline is in 1 week, Earth Day, April 22nd. Bank Switch aims to create a buzz by having people across Canada contact their local managers and reaching out to banks on social media. Basically, they're trying to make the banks compete against each other to be the greenest bank, or more likely the case in Canada would be to be the least horrific bank, which would be a win for them. Banks need to know what their customers want. They often spend a lot of money trying to find this out. We're going to help them. On April 22nd, many who are involved in this campaign will switch their banks, and a lot of people who want to be taking part, they don't necessarily have to switch their banks, but there's other ways to support as well. The goal of Bank Switch, again, is critical conversations between customers, bank managers, district managers, and their head offices, which will take place before the deadline. So this is a great time for us to be meeting, because if you do something this week, you're going to help contribute to that week winding up pressure, right? We want to make suddenly all these voices come out of the woodwork and start to speak. So, and of course, if this week you're not able to, then do it next week. The banks will be continuously hearing from us. Okay, so I've got to jump around a little bit of screen sharing here. Okay, I'm going to do that one first. Go.
So why is the campaign designed like this? Well, part of it is that we're using the bank structure. It is that we're using the bank structure against them. The branch managers are incentivized by the number of accounts and the number of products that they're selling. That's what sets their bonuses. So, you know, if you've just left and gone to a credit union, they might not think more about you. But if they keep hearing, oh, this account, oh, that account, oh, they're going to leave in April, that's going to be something that they're going to start thinking about more, and they're going to be more likely to pass it up the chain. In particular, I was told again by someone who works in the banks that mortgages are really going to scare the bank. So if you have a mortgage, that's the number one thing to put in your ask, is to say that you're looking to refinance your mortgage with a credit union or someone who doesn't have these awful fossil fuel policies. And that's what's really going to get the branch manager's attention. And then the second thing that I think is good about this campaign is that we're making them compete, because we haven't already switched to a credit union. They're going to start thinking, oh, all these people are looking around, not only at my bank, but probably at the other banks. And we want them to start competing on the issue of their policies. And they already are a little bit. I think that's why you saw the announcement from RBC, the announcement from TD. I think we'll probably see new announcements from the banks. But we have to be clear to them that we're paying attention and that we want something more than that.
Okay. Don't share. So those are two of the organizers of the Bank Switch campaign. One of the reasons a lot of us jumped on this is because it is incredibly well organized, and they're reaching out to local community groups to actually make it happen. Maybe that's something we can go into more in the Q&A. I realize I didn't talk too much about who is doing it. I think anyone, Josh or I, could answer that later. So why Bank Switch now? So many of you already know this. Simply burning the global fossil fuel reserves, which have already been developed, will exceed our carbon budget to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming. So that's the fossil fuels that are already in existence right now. Every loan the banks make to companies that are still exploring and building new projects brings us further beyond the emissions pathway needed to keep global warming under 2 degrees. Okay, I'm just going to do another quick screen share here. Sorry, I'm not, there we go. Can you see this little picture here? Got my windows up there. Okay. There we go. The big 5 banks have pumped over 600 billion into fossil fuel companies since the Paris Climate Accord. After ignoring the problem for decades, the banks are now saying they will have net zero lending by 2050, but the projects that they're funding today will still be operational in 2050. Okay, I'm going to show one more clip. I might be doing too many screen shares, but bear with me as I try this out. It doesn't work well this time. I'll do it next time better. Okay, here we go.
The Bank Switch campaign, the numbers we're citing are from the Banking on Climate Change 2020 report, which was put out by Rainforest Action Network and BankTrack. And what you can see here is a list of the total investments by banks in fossil fuels since the Paris Agreement in 2016. What's shocking here is you see RBC has put $140 billion into fossil fuel, either in investments or in loans. But all of the big 5 Canadian banks are up there. TD, Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, CIBC is the lowest at $57 billion. So they're all up in the top 20. And they're smaller banks than some of the American banks. So as a percentage of their total assets, they're actually putting more money into fossil fuels than some of the American banks. The Banking on Climate Change report also looks at the policies that the banks have around fossil fuels, whether they have clear statements on global warming, whether they have a plan to phase these investments and loans out over time, and whether they have investments in some of the worst areas like fracking, Arctic drilling, coal. There's 200 points available. The best banks get sort of 59 or 82 out of 200, which isn't great, but the Canadian banks get between 3 and 0.5 points out of 200, meaning that they have absolutely no policies whatsoever around fossil fuels. They're willing to put money into fracking, tar sands, the Arctic, coal, anything. They'll do it, and they'll do it gladly. So that's why our campaign is trying to get them to change their policies. Even more than getting people to leave the banks, we want to pressure the banks to change their policies because getting that policy shift will have a bigger impact on fossil fuel lending than if we slightly weaken the banks by moving to credit unions. So we've set up a campaign that has you work with the bank as a current client who's willing to move your money and make a statement about that.
So there's another bit I wanted to show you, but I'm going to skip it for now because of time. But they also talk about how banks are funding exploitation of Indigenous lands, and the actions that they're funding through these loans are harming people. Okay, so last one. There we go. Okay, so this is a graphic showing the fossil fuel production gap. This is what I talked about before. The bottom line being the amount of production that needs to take place to keep the warming of climate below or at 1.5 degrees Celsius. The top red line being countries' production plans. Oil companies are planning to produce oil in the hopes that countries, especially internationally, will fail to limit consumption. So they're actually betting on the lack of ability for the international countries to reduce their fossil fuel dependence. Okay, Josh, over to you.
Thanks, Laurel. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about options for alternative green or low carbon investments in banks. But before I do, I just wanted to make an important disclaimer, which is that I'm not an investment advisor. One of the things you should obviously do before you start changing up your portfolio is speak to your advisor. I'm not just saying this because, to ensure obviously that you're making fully informed decisions about your investments, but it's also an important part of the process of making your switch a valuable climate action. And by that, I mean, the more people you talk to, and especially if you have detailed conversations about your concerns and what you'd like to invest in or not invest in, the more impact you're likely to have by raising awareness. So with all that said, now provide a little bit of guidance or at least thought on what to look for when you're thinking about low carbon alternatives. So first off, for regular day-to-day banking, consider a credit union. As you'll see if you've had a chance to peruse the Bank Switch website, these are a good option because they're not driven by profit, but rather by member satisfaction. They have more democratic governance, and the money also tends to stay in the community. So here in BC, options include things like Band City, and there's one you may not have heard of. It's a small one, but CCEC Credit Union, both of which have very strong statements with regards to sustainability and climate change. All that said, I did want to also note, however, that credit unions themselves are not perfect. And so this is one thing I'd like you to keep in mind. Obviously, not everybody has so much time to do this, but if you can, I'd really emphasize that this isn't a sort of one and done type of project. I really recommend, even though I do recommend switching to a credit union just because the big banks are so horrible, I also suggest that you look into what your credit union invests in and make noise about that. And just to give you an example of why I'm saying that, just gonna load up here image of one of Band City's ethical funds. Can people see that? Is that good? Laurel, does that look good?
Yes, looks good.
Thank you. So basically, oh, wait a second. I think I'm sharing the wrong thing here. Sorry about that. Bear with me for a moment.
It's not as easy as it looks, is it? All those little squares. You have to choose the right one.
Nope, definitely isn't. I don't know where it's gone. So are you seeing the IA Clarington?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is an example of one of Van City's ethical funds, and I just wanted to draw your attention to this page. So these are the top 25 holdings. If you look there on the right under the word equity, and just wonder if anybody sees anything unusual there.
The mining corporation,
Yep, for sure. There are lots of
timber company.
All the banks.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one I was looking for. I was going to say for sure. There's you're bound to find like whatever screens you use for, like whatever criteria you use for screening your ethical funds, you'd be likely to find something. But one thing that's really, really common in all these ethical funds is that they invest in the banks. So it's essentially, in a way, it's like, I don't know how to put it. It's like
Ponzi scheme.
yeah, I mean, basically, so they're saying that they don't invest directly in fossil fuels, and it's true, but they invest in the banks, which invest in fossil fuels. So I mean, it all sort of ends up in the same place. And so again, I'm gonna stop my screen share. So again, I'm not suggesting that you don't switch. I think the credit unions are definitely an important step up. And if you're talking to people about why you're switching, and letting them know, that will definitely have an impact. But I'm just saying that even when you do switch to something like a credit union, you're likely still going to not you. at least indirectly be funding fossil fuels. And it's a bit frustrating because Van City says in no uncertain terms that they're proud to take a leadership position on climate change. We do not invest capital or assets in oil, gas, or coal companies. So, I mean, yeah, frustrating, but do consider switching to a credit union. Just make sure you talk to them as well. More broadly, one of the videos that Laura showed at the outset alluded to the fact that it's not just your day-to-day banking that you want to think about. So they mentioned mortgages, but more broadly, think about your larger suite of investments. Chances are that most of your savings are tied up in a range of investments. So it's worth spending some time looking into whether you're funding climate change through these as well, and possibly reorienting to more clean funds. And that includes things like your RSPs and TFSAs. And on this, I'm not going to name specific funds. So if you're interested, I'd be glad to suggest some of this afterwards. I just, generally speaking, suggest looking into things like green energy ETFs. These are, in the past couple of years in particular, a really big growing area. And so they invest in things like wind, solar, and other forms of renewable energy. And as you might expect, there's a lot of growth in these areas. And so some of them have very good performance, financial performance. So it's not as if you have to throw your money away to fund real climate action. You may also think about sectors that are specifically focused on goods and services that aren't carbon intensive. So for example, healthcare, although of course you may have other concerns with a given sector. Overall, I'd say the main sort of criteria to keep in mind is that apply a simple two-step screen, which is that do they invest in fossil fuels? And secondly, do they invest in banks? If the answer is yes to either, and by which I mean the big banks that we've noted are very dirty. So if the answer is yes to either of these, and you can determine this pretty quickly by looking at the top 10 or 25 or whatever holdings, then maybe look elsewhere. And I just also mentioned that it's quite easy to get distracted by the greenwashing catchphrases. You'll see a lot of things like, we are investing millions in clean energy, which they probably were going to do anyways. But it doesn't mean they're not investing billions in fossil fuel stills. You'll see things like, we have a plan to cut operating emissions by 2050, the usual long timelines, the reference to operating emissions, which really has very little to do with what they're investing money in. You'll see, so in our group for our kids North Shore here, we shared some of the examples of information we received from investment advisors and things in our conversations. And they even say things like, we're doing LED lighting and this and that. So, basically you'll get thrown all sorts of things, and it can be a bit frustrating and tiresome to cut through it all. So I'd really, again, just suggest focusing on those two simple questions and keeping whoever you're talking to honest that way. Finally, just a closing thought is that whatever you do switch to, I'd really emphasize that you always tell people why you're switching. So the important point here is that, there's really the switching itself, which is important because then you're not funding climate change. You're not putting your money in dirty investments. But it's also perhaps equally important just to make people aware of the issue by talking to as many people as you can about it in the industry. And so both are really important objectives. You can focus on one or the other. So if you're concerned or you don't have time to investigate good alternatives, you can at least start by talking to people about it. And that's very important in and of itself. So now, I'm just going to do a quick interview with Christian, who introduced himself earlier. So Christian is going to share with us his experiences about switching banks, and he's the husband of one of our For Our Kids team members, as you mentioned. And thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Josh. So yeah, my wife and I had talked for at least over a year about switching banks and just not being happy for a lot of different reasons. with our bank, which was HSBC. It was out of convenience why we selected them in the first place. We moved from England 5 years ago, and we had HSBC there. And it was one of the few banks in the UK and in Canada, so it made it a bit easier. But actually, we found out later that it didn't really benefit us all that much. So in the long run, it really didn't matter. And then so it was out of convenience at first, and then there's this thought in your head that it's super painful to make the switch. That your credit card is attached to parking in Vancouver at Google Movies, and you just kind of go, it's not broken, why fix it? And then I stumbled upon an article a few months ago about HSBC and their policies on climate change, and I just I got disgusted when I read it that they had these 2050 targets, and they weren't going to stop funding coal until 2040, and they were kind of bragging about how good of a policy that was. And then I read further on that their president actually is putting this to a vote, and that 75% of the shareholders have to agree on these policies before they would do anything. I was just like, what kind of leadership is this? It's pathetic. Um, so pretty quickly, I made a decision just to open up a new account at Van City and just jotting down, what do I have associated with the cards and my bank account and direct deposit, and I started making a switch over a month period. It just took me a month to get everything kind of swapped around, and then I walked back into HSBC after being a client here in Canada for 5 years. Didn't know what to expect, if the teller was gonna say anything. So I walked up and said I'd like to close my account. And right off the bat, she asked why, and she was quite nice. And so I just explained to her that I thought there was a lack of urgency on the part of HSBC dealing with climate change, and I referenced some of the points that I read in the couple of articles that were directly about HSBC. And she said, okay, okay, okay. And then she disappeared and came back with the branch manager. This is at the Longsdale branch in North Van. And so the branch manager came out and we discussed, and it was great because I was kind of hoping that this was going to happen, but it happened right in the lobby in front of 5 other customers waiting in line. We had a 5 to 10 minute conversation. And during that conversation, she said, oh, well, all banks are the same. And she quickly pointed out that, oh, well, credit unions aren't any better, even though I never mentioned credit union. She just quickly came out with that. And she said, oh, I think we're doing great. And we have more power that once we make a change, because we're a global company, we have the ability to make a bigger impact, positive impact. And I just went along with it and just said, I still feel like there's more that you can do. If you want to be a leader, you should be, this is a perfect way to differentiate yourself from all the other banks, and you're just missing the boat. And so we kind of left it there after 10 minutes of discussing, and I closed the account. And as I was driving home, she actually called me again, and because she had forgotten something in our conversation, a term, and it was about about Van City, and that they were offering ethical funds, and they found out a couple years ago that they couldn't, Van City couldn't guarantee that everything within their fund was ethical, and so they apparently pulled that product offering for a while. But I just kind of felt it was a bit petty, that she was trying to make themselves look better by bashing somebody else instead of just saying, we're doing this on our own. We're leading, and we're going to make some sound decisions. So I made the switch, and I understand that it can be super daunting, but I mean, sitting down and doing these things is more work. Going to school and learning about, how, your career could be focused on environmental studies and making a positive impact. That's hard. Changing your bank is easy. It really is. Um, there's a little bit of pain at first, but give yourself an hour a week, and in 4 or 5 weeks it'll be done. And it felt pretty good. Actually, it felt really good having that conversation with the branch manager. And I'm kind of hoping that more people will do that, because I felt like that will, the conversation I had with her, it'll definitely stick in her head. I wouldn't be surprised if she actually passed that up, because it was a fairly significant conversation. And I'm not a big fish. I'm not, I don't have a ton of money or anything like that. So I don't have a lot of pull, but it seemed like she took it pretty seriously. So I think the more that she hears it, the more that they'll feed back to their superiors, and hopefully say, there's an opportunity here, because they won't do it because of out of the goodness of their heart. They've got to be concerned about losing customers and getting a bad name. That's the only way they're going to make a change. So that was my experience, and I want to also pass on. There's a program that was available in the UK when we lived there. That was an automatic switching service, um, and quite a few people have used the service. And the UK government actually set this up as a right, for people to be able to use a system. It's basically one phone call, and you say, I want to switch from NatWest to Lloyd's, and the banks take care of everything. They make sure direct deposits, everything that comes into your account or leaves your account is done without you having to get involved at all. And it's a guaranteed service, so you can't lose any
Nobody's ready
money.
to sign up.
You can't lose any money during this, because that's a big fear why people don't switch. They're like, oh, I might bounce a check, or you know something might get lost. But there's a system out there, and there's a model out there that the UK uses, and I think we could probably put some pressure on the Canadian government to do the same, because it was specifically set up to help with customer service and members being able to hold banks accountable. And it doesn't feel like we really have that much power here in Canada. And I grew up in the States. It's the same thing in the States. There's no real way for customers to hold people to account, unless it's just, one person at a time changing banks.
Josh, do you have the link to the reference to someone who, a blogger or something, who explains how to do the switch? Well, we're going to be sending out an email too with all of this information for everyone, so don't worry if you don't catch it now.
Yeah, I think I was going to include that in the follow-up email. I don't have that handy just at the moment.
I just was remembering that one of the suggestions he said was to not actually switch for a month after. So you don't have to switch, or you can start up your new bank and you can move everything over. And then once you're sure everything is running smoothly, then you can close your old bank. You don't have to do it immediately.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question here that came in the chat. Do we know about cost capital savings, if this is a positive option? Does anybody have any experience or researched cost capital savings?
I researched cost capital because I like the notion of local, and they admitted that they're not very advanced in it yet.
I think I spoke to them and they said that they were like connected to a fund that had a fund, something like that. I had the same kind of story from TD, that they had connection to someone who had something, but when I talked to them in the city, they were like, we'll give you $300 if you do it now. We've got it all set up.
Well, I think it's also worthwhile to definitely pressure, as Josh said, right? The pressure or just express your interest in those local credit unions, and just tell them basically, let me know when you are advancing in it. This is basically what I told them. I'm interested because you're local, you're North Vancouver based, but really you need to come up with a little bit more. So I understand they work through brokers, and that was the whole challenge and issue with them. But if there's enough people saying the same thing, I think they'll do more.
Josh, did you have anything else you wanted to say before I go into our action steps?
No, just thank you, Christian. And yeah, the one thing I just want to comment on, I guess, is I thought that was very interesting that the that they brought up the credit unions without you mentioning it, which to me suggests that they likely have been hearing these concerns, and I think that's a bit of a positive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank
I
you very
agree.
much.
No worries.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much. I'm feeling I'm kind of rushing people a little, but I can see our time is passing. So Bank Switch suggests, I just posted this above, but again, we'll send an email out. Sign up to the Bank Switch campaign first. And the reason for that, they want you to sign up on your website because they're trying to use this number in their own negotiations with all of the banks to say, this is our campaign. We have 1,000 people who are behind this. They said, you know, it has more impact than if they say we have 10 people. Right now, I think they're at 500, but I'm optimistic that in the week before Earth Week, they can get up to 1,000, or if there's some viral action, it could even suddenly go up to a couple thousand. So I just put the link here. If anyone is able to, you can click on it. So we just have a few actions. I might just do the one. If while I'm talking, if you want to click on that link, and if you're interested, you can sign up. Signing up to the Bank Switch campaign doesn't mean you have to switch your bank. It's kind of it's saying that you're interested in doing it, or you have a commitment to it, but it's not, there's no record anywhere exactly. There's no requirement to switch or when you'll switch. So I signed up even though I'm not going to be able to do it this week because I'm kind of in the process and it's something I can get behind. So if you're interested, please sign up. And then number 2, for those who are going to go through with it, you can contact your bank manager to express your concerns and say that you're thinking of switching, and ask them to share their concern with their district manager, if possible. And then if you want to, you can switch your bank on April 22nd or begin going through the process. I don't think it's really a hard and fast deadline, but that was the Bank Switch campaign's deadline to the banks. They said people will decide which bank to switch to on the 22nd. So the banks are supposed to get all their ducks in a row by the 22nd versus just a prolonged, you know, lack of defined time. Okay, let me just see here. Okay, so if anyone hasn't yet, this is the step 1. We're just going to do a few quick action steps. Is to sign up. It's the easiest one. And if you can't do it or your device doesn't allow it, then you can do it later. The reason I'm doing it now is because people often just forget or don't get to something. But when we do it as part of the session, sometimes more people are likely to do it. Okay, maybe I should get my husband to do it. Awesome. So, is there anyone trying to sign up right now? I'm gonna get my husband too.
I signed up.
Now is the moment. If you're
Can I say something?
Yes.
I'm in Okanagan, and we have Valley First, which is part of First West Credit Union. And my investor advisor is very good at helping me get into NEI, which is an ethical investment organization or fund. And the information I get from her is pretty clear about what they are doing and what they're not doing and what they are able to do with that fund. And that's about the best we can do for ethical investments. But we need to, when we sit down with those people, not just your daily banking, but even, you know, when you're doing a TFSA or something, to say to them that I really want my little bit of money doing something better than not. And we have to keep pushing to get them to listen to us. even though they say perhaps that it's out of their hands. We have to push to say that they've got to put it in their hands, and they've got to put it up, talk to the people above them.
Yes, and the reason for the bank switch campaign is as they mentioned in that little clip, and that video is available for anyone. Instead of just like one or two people changing their banks, which may or may not really impact them, they're trying to make this like critical moment where they're saying, there are many of us together and we're all going to be leaving your bank. They want all the little voices from the managers to be talking in their local banks, and then bringing it to the district managers, and then the district managers bringing it up, so that instead of it being just big media campaigns, it's actually something that's organically moving through the banks. I don't know who's might feel comfortable to do this, but if you're comfortable, you can actually do this little action right now, which is, I've just listed TD, RBC, HSBC, BMO, and Scotiabank's Facebook pages. I made a little blurb here, which you can alter. And if you want to, you can click on the page and then just go to one of their recent posts and comment. You can use this comment or edit it. I was really concerned to learn about this bank's lack of policy around fossil fuel loans. Everything I do has my children's future. You can change that. Our collective future and wellness at the core. I've been with your bank for X number of years. I hope that as I learn about the risk posed by climate change and the kind of unhealthy and sustainable investments needed for collective future, that my bank will be changing too. I would like to maintain a healthy, non-toxic relationship with TD, in my case. So if you want to, you can do that little action now. We just have a few minutes.
Laurel. We have a quick question here based on the experience you have. Is what's best? Is it to go in person to meet a branch manager, or to call to set up a meeting with a bank manager?
My own advice would be, because of COVID, I would do everything virtually. I'm not sure if it's beneficial to keep a paper trail, like to send emails. Josh, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely better to make an appointment and have a virtual appointment right now.
Thank you.
And I think what we might miss in that physical experience, we might be able to make up for if in that virtual appointment you ask them to share your concern with their district manager. That might be a way to kind of expand our reach. And then with your own friends and family, I think one of the key parts of this campaign is to increase the numbers. If you can post on your own social media or in your conversations or your front yard distance conversations, just tell them a bit about what the banks are doing. Ask them to sign up. Tell them, because I think a lot of people are intimidated. You can say, you don't have to do it like immediately, but this is to show the banks who's serious and actually concerned about what they're doing. It would be great if we could gift the group 100 signatures or something like that, if each of us just got 3 people to sign up. Now me and my husband have signed up, so we've got 2. Is there any other questions?
I'm curious about the communication piece that Eleanor mentioned at the beginning of, like, okay, it's one thing to do this, but how can we amplify the message?
So I have these 3 actions, which I'll share in the email. So one is, to talk to the banks on social media, and then to talk on your own social media or in your personal conversations. To spread the word. I've also got another template of an email you can send out to 5 people to tell them about this. And another thing we've been talking about possibly doing is having a few key people who might be interested in doing something. Some people are also standing outside the banks with like hand-painted signs and taking a photo. This is a really useful thing to do, to actually have a physical person in a location. And it might also help bridge that digital disconnect with, not being able to go into managers, and you can send the photo to the manager and say, I'm sharing this on my social media because it's that important to me. And they might go, oh, no, we want to get more customers from your friend network, not fewer.
So Marion,
pardon?
Marion, one other thing that's available, typically most banks will have a complaint mechanism, something online where you can go and complain. I think a lot of us naturally just think of complaints like relates to customer service or something happened with your card, but actually you can file a complaint based on their policies. And so I'm sure all the banks have somewhere, either online or somewhere, you could drop
That's a great
letter,
idea.
a letter in the post. It's
yeah.
And I think, these aren't that common, these complaints, these type of complaints, so they should get elevated.
Yeah. I'm also seeing something from Alex about a fax and email spam. Fax. I'm curious. Has anyone heard about that?
I have not heard about it, but I know the Bank Switch campaign did say you could fax it, and they also gave a website that you can send a fax for free. So for those who don't have the time or energy to contact a bank manager or aren't into social media, you can also go to this website and copy and paste the template and send a fax to your bank.
I need a tutorial first on how to fax. Yeah. Okay, that's awesome.
I was in a webinar with some teenagers who were also doing bank switches, and at the time they were like inboxing the bank during the webinar, and the bank's like inbox kind of jammed, so that was pretty funny.
That's pretty cool. Do you know what organization that was?
I can't remember.
No worries.
Sorry. But there was a bunch of teens, so they're awesome.
Laurel?
Yeah, who's that?
Can I jump in?
Yes,
It's Violette.
Go for it.
Thank you. I put my name in the chat, but I wasn't sure if that's the way to do it. But I just want to say thanks to Josh for sharing the story. And I also did a bank switch probably 6 years ago when they were trying to put the pipeline through the North Dakota. And warriors were trying to save the water there, and I thought, oh, what can we do? And I went to Royal Bank and pulled my investments out of there, and my mortgage, and my RSPs, and the RSP. So I just wanted to say thanks to Josh for sharing that, and I totally agree that it's doable, and it doesn't have to be a conflict thing at all. And I wanted to also amplify what your other guest was saying. Sorry, I didn't catch the names because I'm in transit. But the importance in saying why you're doing it. So that's what I said. I said, because you're funding the pipeline that was going through the Dakota area. And then also told everybody that I did that. And just to the person who was talking about communications, one thing that I did after that is bring a motion to, if you belong to any kind of association or federation or any kind of, will typically have a fund that they're investing in something. So bringing motions to set your own policy internally. So we did that with the BC Teachers Federation to bring a motion for them to divest their investments. Yeah, we're working on teachers' pensions to do the same. And then also we were trying to bring a motion to bring a campaign of awareness to all teachers, all 47,000 teachers across the province, to also divest. But I really like this idea of going actually into your banking institution and having the conversation and seeing if you can influence their practices from within and potentially even stay if they're willing to act differently. Because I realize now that all I did is said, I'm leaving and this is the reason, and left. But unfortunately, now my voice is no longer in that conversation, and potentially maybe it would do more good if it still was. So thanks to your guest. That was really super comprehensive.
I just want to speak to that quickly because a lot of the people in my networks have already made these changes. You can totally still have a voice. You're never without a voice. You can always contact them and say, I switched because of this. Before that, I was with you for this many years and I enjoyed my service. Get on board. Now I'm talking to my networks, and many of them are in your bank.
That's true. That's
Never
true.
too late.
I like that too. Yeah, thank you. That's very true.
Yeah, and I think it's always nice to have a little compliment in there, like, you gave me nice service. I things were going well until they weren't. So I just put in the chat here, if there's anyone who's comfortable to do some kind of public action, like to make a sign and take a photo in front of the bank. If you've got kids, throwing a kid in there usually increases people's interest in looking at the image by like 3 or 4-fold, seriously. Especially if it's a baby, then it'll go viral and become the cover page of the City of Vancouver's Climate Emergency Action Plan, which happened before. True story. So if anyone has that interest, you could also email us or connect with us on social media with images. If you make a post, you can do a screenshot or any story. Like if you have a little written story of going in, we can also reshare that on all of our different pages. Christy, you look like you're thinking about something.
I don't know.
Oh, you went on mute. Come back, come back.
This is my thinking face, I guess. Yeah, I think my kids, they love taking pictures and they love being in pictures. So
and people love them in pictures, as we can see by the Extinction Rebellion photos that got circulated a bunch.
Yes, yeah, me and my belly there.
Don't worry, everyone's looking at the fact that, hey, this isn't just young wild protesters. This is everybody.
Yeah, Avery did really well with her sign. I don't know if anybody saw her sign, but it said, please be kind to the earth and please stop using plastic bags as much as possible. Thank you. All in one little sign. It was pretty cute.
We can touch base too if you need any support in doing that. Eleanor.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, in case it's helpful, I really like my financial advisor, and she's a personal friend of mine, and I had been a little nervous about broaching this topic with her, but we spoke about how we're going to give ourselves a calendar year to change my portfolio. And she mentioned that she's taking what is the course that investment advisors have to get continually recertified, and they take like professional development courses? Is it the CFA or something like that? Some professional whatever. And so she was about to embark upon a multi-week long course on sustainable investments and investing, and because she's on a learning curve as well. And so it might be something to ask your investment advisors if they are learning about the topic. It's so new, and are they planning to take courses themselves, and what's their own professional development plan there to help you, because I'll be learning a lot from her, and I plan to challenge her. Like, we've had really good conversations, so I'm looking forward to what she learns to do that.
That's brilliant. I love that. And instead of just saying to the manager, you change the system, like, are you going to personally commit at your branch to learning about this? And I don't think you can sign up and be part of the campaign. You don't have to do it exactly the way they say. Do it the way that works for you.